Welcome back, everyone. I'm Yossi Goslin, NBA salary cap expert, and in this video, I'm excited to talk about the Memphis Grizzlies, a team that with good health should be right back in the playoff mix. They already have a pretty deep roster, the rotation's pretty set, but they still need another big man to round things out. So I want to go over all the different options they can potentially pursue at center at all different salary ranges and see how they could fit their cap sheet. But before I do, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. So let's take a quick look at the Grizzlies' payroll so far, see where things are at. And the biggest thing of note is that they have a very high payroll. They're already very close to $180 million, which is above the $171.3 million luxury tax line. And that is largely thanks to Desmond Bane's max deal kicking in. And it could have been even higher, but they did get off of Steven Adams and David Roddy during last year's trade deadline, who had money already for this year. And the other thing to note is that they are currently above the $178.7 million first apron level. And that makes things a little complicated for team building because if they remain above it, they cannot take back more salary in a trade than they're sending out. And they have a lower tier mid-level exception. Instead of the $13 million one, it would be at $5 million instead. So they're going to want to get below this first before they do anything else. And overall, the objective is, as far as how they want the payroll to be, they probably want it to be below that $171 million amount anyways. I don't think they're going to want to be taxpayers this year, considering they missed the playoffs last year, largely thanks to injuries, but also they got blown out in the first round of the playoffs 2 years ago. And then the other thing to note is they have several trade exceptions. However, they do not have access to them at the moment because they're over the first apron. So the new CBA made it so that if you're over the first apron level, you cannot use older trade exceptions from a previous season. So they're currently locked out, but they can unlock them once they get below that $178 million amount. So here's a more relevant payroll that the Grizzlies could be looking at. I had them decrease payroll by doing a couple things. One, I declined Luke Kennard's $14.8 million team option. I think that's very likely to happen. They could decline it and extend them to a new deal before free agency even begins. But just to make things simple, I'm going to assume they just decline it completely. And then the other thing I did, I took out Yuta Watanabe and his $2.7 million because he's got a player option and there are reports that he's going to go overseas. So seems like he's going to decline it. So when you take out those two guys, I now have them well below both the first apron and the luxury tax. They're about $13 million below the first apron and $7.8 million below the luxury tax line. So now they can actually do stuff to improve the roster. I would still, though, consider getting even more flexibility, maybe offloading some other end of rotation guys like Zaire Williams, Jake LaRavia, Derrick Rose. John Conchar maybe too, but I like him. I think they should definitely try to keep him. That's a good deal. But getting even more flexibility below this would allow them not only to get a more expensive center, but maybe even use the entire mid-level exception, which I just opened up by opening up more flexibility with this cap sheet, and maybe they can even use some of the trade exceptions that they have. So let's start pursuing centers, and with it being a couple days before the draft, one of the more exciting scenarios is the possibility of Memphis moving up to the top 3 to select Alex Sarr or, more likely, Donovan Clingan. So it's been kind of hard for me to try to put together a deal, but I think the Grizzlies would probably either have to trade Marcus Smart or a future first-round pick to get Houston motivated to move down. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Marcus Smart on the Grizzlies, given that Smart and Bane are both making max contracts. It's just a very expensive backcourt to have Smart making $20 million as well. But maybe you can move up by trading him and maybe get a answer at the 3 as well. So here's something I came up with. It brings in the number 3 and Dorian Finney-Smith to Memphis in a 3-team trade that has the number 9 going to Houston. And they also get a first-round pick from Brooklyn because they have a surplus of picks. And then Brooklyn gets Marcus Smart because they're trying to get better this year. Not the most perfect trade at all. I highly doubt this even happens. But now in this scenario, the Grizzlies have the number 3 pick. They can draft Donovan Clingan most likely, and they get an answer at the 3 in Dorian Finney-Smith, who's making $15 million. He helps their defensive identity and doesn't need to take the ball away from a lot of their other guards. So then they are well below the tax, roughly 8 million, so they can then fill up the rest of the roster, and they should have enough room. Maybe they use a portion of their mid-level exception to pursue another guard with it. So let's say there is no opportunity to trade up, which I think is the more likely scenario. So the Grizzlies decide to pursue an upgrade at center through trade, which I don't think should be hard to do. And sounds like there's going to be a lot of decent ones available. There was a report from Yahoo Sports yesterday about a lot of big center names like Clint Capela, Brook Lopez, just to name a few that could be available. So just for this example, I'm going to talk about Clint Capela, who makes a little over $20 million. So he's on the pricier side of the Grizzlies center options. And the Hawks may be ready to move on from him anyways. They might be drafting another center, and they need to save money immediately. And since he's expiring, it would be the easiest way to get immediate savings. And since he's on the last year of his deal, the Grizzlies don't have to commit to him. They could try him out, and they could easily extend him at any point next season and maybe try to get him at a lower amount to help fit the rest of the payroll structure. So to make salaries match, I had them send out Zaire Williams, Derrick Rose, John Conchar. Maybe more teams are involved, so the Hawks don't have to take back some of those players if they don't want them. And as you can see, I plugged in Clint Capela, and they have a pretty deep roster while keeping Marcus Smart and their 9th overall pick. I don't know what kind of asset the Grizzlies might have to trade to make this work. Maybe one future pick that's super protected. But their front court is pretty loaded now, and their backcourt is set because they still have Smart. And since they're keeping 9, maybe they can try to select the highest upside wing player available to them. There's some guys like Cody Williams, Tejan Salon, Dalton Connect, Ron Holland, just to name a few. I'm not a draft expert, but in this type of scenario, that's where I could see them going. Now, let's say the Grizzlies want to go with a more affordable option at center. Instead of like a $20 million guy, they want someone making around like $13, $14 million, somewhere in the mid-level exception range. And according to that same Yahoo Sports report, there was mentions of guys like Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Stewart being available. So the Grizzlies could go after those guys. And another thing they could do is try to sign a center with their mid-level exception, but not a lot of great options out there. They could now, starting this year, use the mid-level exception as a trade exception, use it to absorb someone who's making equal to or less than that amount, starting at $12.9 million. So for this example, I'm going to go with Robert Williams, who makes slightly less than Mitchell Robinson, Isaiah Stewart. So it would fit right into that mid-level exception. Now, I know obviously the big issue with Robert Williams is his health. Just missed all of last season and just struggled to stay on the court even before then. But when healthy, I really do love his fit there. And alternatively, they could just trade Zaire Williams straight up for Robert Williams, which I think Memphis would probably be more interested in doing if they were seriously interested in acquiring him. Because then when you plug him in, they finish right below the tax while fielding the entire roster. And I want to get into my favorite center option, who's kind of a surprise addition to the trade market, Walker Kessler, because according to Yahoo Sports in that same article, the Jazz are listening to offers for him. And just about any team that needs a center should jump on that, try to get him. Main reason, aside from his potential, is that he still has 2 years left on his rookie contract, so he's going to be making virtually nothing over the next 2 years, which in Memphis' case would help a lot with their payroll issues as they manage having 2 max contracts and several other expensive players. So the question is, what would Utah need? I would imagine they want a late future first, something like in the 2030s, because they're trying to spread out their picks, have as many over future years as possible. That's what they got when they traded Mitchell and Gobert. So let's say they trade a future first to Utah and then also swap number 9 for number 29, which is owned by Utah. Just something to put together. I don't know if that's enough. I don't know if that's too much for Memphis. They also get Utah to take on Derrick Rose, so they just swapped those salaries. And now, again, the Grizzlies have a super deep roster, but they have this loaded front court already, and they still have way more flexibility below the tax and the apron to do some other things. Maybe they want to use their mid-level exception on someone else. So there you have it, some realistic options at center for the Grizzlies, in my opinion. I think they have the flexibility to go for one of these more expensive options and the assets to go over someone as valuable as Walker Kessler. The worst case scenario is that they're not aggressive at all, and maybe they just keep Brandon Clark and Jaren Jackson at their main front court, and then just pursue some backup options for the minimum. Maybe if a guy like Kevon Looney is available, they just sign him. But obviously, this aggressiveness would be a lot more fun. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Let me know what centers you'd love to see the Grizzlies pursue. If there's some others I didn't mention, let me know. Maybe I could let you guys know how realistic that is and how they could go ahead and pursue it.